All right, ready to unlock the power of stillness. Today, we're taking a deep dive into mindfulness meditation.
Sounds intriguing.
We're focusing on a YouTube video from Inner Balance Red Print. They talk about finding your inner sanctuary.
Inner sanctuary, huh? I like that.
Yeah, it's all about using breath work, visualization, even forgiveness as tools.
Those are some pretty powerful tools.
I know, right? But what I'm curious about is how do they actually make these concepts useful for everyday life? Not just some abstract meditation thing.
That's the key, isn't it? Bridging that gap between theory and practice.
Exactly. So let's jump right in.
Sounds good to me.
One of the first things that struck me about the video is how much emphasis they put on the breath.
Oh yeah, the breath. It's so foundational to mindfulness.
They even use this image of the breath as a healing force, which I have to admit sounded a bit, well, out there at first.
It might sound a bit woo-woo at first glance, but there's actually some solid science behind it.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
Think about the vagus nerve.
Vagus nerve. Okay. I vaguely remember that from anatomy class.
Well, it's like this super highway connecting your brain to your body. And deep, conscious breathing can actually stimulate it.
Oh, I see.
And when you stimulate the vagus nerve, that's when you trigger the relaxation response. You lower stress hormones like cortisol. Your heart rate slows down.
So your whole internal state starts to shift.
Exactly. So it's not just some airy-fairy idea. There's actual physiology happening.
Like, that makes a lot more sense now. But I guess I always thought mindfulness was about more than just feeling relaxed.
You're absolutely right. It's about so much more than just relaxation. It's about cultivating awareness.
Right. Being present in the moment, all that good stuff.
And that's where the breath comes in as this incredible tool.
Okay, how so?
The video uses this analogy of the breath as an anchor for your attention.
An anchor, okay.
Each breath becomes this opportunity to notice what's happening in your body and mind. The sensations, the thoughts, the emotions. Just observing them without judgment.
It's like training and being present, right?
Exactly. And the more you practice this during meditation, the more it starts to spill over into how you handle everything else life throws at you.
Interesting. So the breath becomes this bridge between your inner world and the outer world.
That's a great way to put it. It's like this constant thread of awareness that you can tap into no matter what's going on around you.
Okay, that's starting to click for me. But then they go on to talk about visualization, creating this inner sanctuary.
Yes, the inner sanctuary. That's a powerful concept.
It is. But honestly, I've tried visualization before, and sometimes it just feels like I'm making stuff up.
I can relate to that. It can feel a bit forced or artificial if you don't approach it in the right way.
Exactly. So does the video address how to make visualization actually work?
They do, and they tap into something really important, engaging all your senses. It's not just about seeing a peaceful image in your mind. It's about feeling it, hearing it, even smelling it. The more vivid you make it, the more real it becomes for your brain.
Okay, that makes sense.
So instead of just picturing a serene beach, you might imagine the warmth of the sun on your skin, the sound of the waves crashing, the scent of salt air.
Wow, that's so much more immersive.
And the more immersive it is, the more your brain starts to respond as if you're actually there.
So you're essentially tricking your brain into feeling calmer and more relaxed.
In a way, yes, you're tapping into the power of your imagination to create a positive physiological response.
I like that. So it's not about escaping reality. It's about creating this mental space you can access anytime you need a break from stress.
That's the key. It's like having a portable oasis you can carry with you wherever you go. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes to access it, even in the midst of chaos.
That's pretty cool. But I have to ask, they also talk about forgiveness in the video, and that feels like a whole other beast.
It does, doesn't it? Forgiveness can be a really tough concept to wrap our heads around, let alone actually practice.
Yeah, especially when you've been deeply hurt. So how do they even begin to tackle something as complex as forgiveness through mindfulness?
Well, they use this really interesting analogy of a garden.
A garden. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So imagine your mind is like a garden. Your thoughts and emotions are like seeds. Some of those seeds grow into beautiful flowers, joy, love, compassion, but others can sprout into thorny weeds, anger, resentment, bitterness.
I see where you're going with this.
Forgiveness is essentially about weeding your mental garden. It's about recognizing those negative thoughts and emotions that are causing you pain and choosing to let them go.
But weeding a real garden is hard work. How do they suggest tackling something as tough as forgiveness, especially when you've been really hurt?
That's where the mindfulness piece comes in again. It's not about condoning what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about acknowledging the pain, but choosing not to let it define you.
But how do you actually do that?
Yeah.
Those feelings are real. They don't just disappear because you want them to.
You're absolutely right. And the video acknowledges that. They suggest starting by simply noticing those weeds, the anger, the resentment, the hurt, without judgment, just becoming aware of them. And then gently starting to shift your focus.
Shift your focus to what?
Well, it could be to your breath, to a positive memory, or even to a feeling of compassion for yourself or the other person. It's not about denying the pain. It's about loosening its grip on you.
Okay, so it's a gradual process. It's about changing your relationship to those negative emotions rather than trying to force them away.
Exactly. And that's where the practice comes in. The more you practice mindfulness and cultivate self-awareness, the easier it becomes to choose forgiveness, even in difficult situations.
So it's not about achieving some kind of perfect state of forgiveness overnight. It's about making those small, conscious choices day after day.
You got it. It's about cultivating a more forgiving mindset, a more compassionate way of being in the world.
That's a powerful concept. And it makes me wonder, how do they suggest we actually put all of this into practice in our daily lives? I mean, it's one thing to feel calm and forgiving when you're meditating, but what about when you're facing real-world challenges?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready to get practical.
Me too.
Let's do it. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground breath work, visualization, even forgiveness, all through this lens of mindfulness. But how do we actually apply this stuff when we step off the meditation cushion and into the real world? You know, it's easy to feel calm and centered when you're sitting in silence, but what about when you're facing a work deadline or stuck in traffic or dealing with a family argument?
Right, that's where the rubber meets the road. And the video acknowledges that it takes effort to integrate these practices into our daily routines. It's not about becoming some kind of Zen master overnight.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a Zen master, more like a Zen student who's still figuring things out. So what kind of practical advice do they offer?
Well, they emphasize that even small moments of mindfulness can make a big difference. It's about finding those little pockets of peace throughout the day. They call them mindful pauses.
Mindful pauses. Okay, I like that. Sounds less intimidating than trying to meditate for an hour every day.
Right, it's more about incorporating mindfulness into your existing routine rather than adding something totally new.
So what does a mindful pause actually look like? Give me an example.
Sure, it could be as simple as taking 3 deep breaths before answering a stressful email, or intentionally noticing the sensations of your feet on the ground as you walk. Just bringing your attention to the present moment, even for a few seconds.
Okay, that's manageable. But do those little moments really make a tangible impact? I mean, it seems almost too simple.
It might seem simple, but think about it this way. Every time you react impulsively or get swept away by stress, you're reinforcing those neural pathways in your brain. You're strengthening those habits of reactivity.
Ah, okay. So it's like those little moments are actually rewiring your brain.
Exactly. When you pause, even for a few seconds, and choose a more mindful response, you're literally training your brain to be calmer, more present, more resilient.
Interesting. So it's like building a new muscle, one mindful moment at a time.
I love that analogy. It really is like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that could add up over time. But what about forgiveness? That feels a lot harder to just pause and choose. How do they suggest applying that in everyday situations?
Well, the video emphasizes that forgiveness is not about the other person. It's not about condoning what they did or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about recognizing that holding on to anger and resentment only hurts you in the end.
That's a tough one to swallow,
Yeah.
especially when you've been really wronged.
I know, it can be really hard.
Yeah.
But the video uses this powerful analogy of drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's a vivid way of illustrating how holding on to anger and resentment can actually poison your own system.
Wow, that's a pretty stark image. Okay, so instead of seeking revenge or dwelling on the hurt, you're choosing to free yourself from that negativity. But how do you actually do that? It's easy to say, but what if the hurt is really deep?
They suggest a few different approaches. One is to try shifting your perspective. Instead of focusing on what the other person did wrong, try to understand the situation from their point of view. Maybe they were acting out of their own pain, insecurity, or even ignorance.
That's asking a lot, especially when you're the one who's been hurt.
It is, and the video doesn't sugarcoat that. But even a small shift in perspective can help to loosen the grip of anger and resentment.
So it's about trying to find a little bit of understanding, even if you don't condone their actions.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and we all have our own baggage. Another technique they suggest is practicing loving kindness meditation.
Wait, sending loving thoughts to someone who hurt you, how does that even work?
It might sound counterintuitive, but it's a powerful practice. It's not about condoning their actions or saying what they did was okay. It's about cultivating compassion, even for someone who's caused you pain.
So it's about shifting your internal state rather than trying to change what happened or make them apologize.
Exactly. It's about breaking the cycle of negativity and reclaiming your own inner peace.
That's a really radical concept, but I can see how it could be incredibly liberating.
It is. And the video emphasizes that it's a practice, a journey, not a destination. You don't have to be perfect at it, just keep coming back to it again and again.
So it's about progress, not perfection. But even with the best intentions, it's easy to get discouraged, especially when we slip up. What happens when we react impulsively or find ourselves dwelling on negative thoughts? Does the video address that?
They do, and they emphasize the importance of self-compassion. It's about recognizing that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and we all have moments where we fall short of our ideals. The key is to not beat ourselves up about it.
So give ourselves a break.
Exactly. Treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer to a good friend.
I think a lot of us are much harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else.
That's so true. But the video reminds us that we can choose to be our own best friend, to offer ourselves that same love and support, even when we mess up.
That's a really important reminder. We can't expect to be mindful all the time. It's a journey, not a destination.
Well said. And sometimes the most mindful thing we can do is to simply acknowledge our imperfections and offer ourselves a little grace.
So it's about embracing that imperfection, that humanness, as part of the process.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all works in progress, and that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's beautiful.
This has been such an insightful conversation. And I'm really starting to see how mindfulness and forgiveness aren't just abstract concepts. They're practical tools we can use to create a more peaceful and fulfilling life.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering, how does this all connect to the bigger picture? I mean, we've been talking about inner peace and personal growth, but does the video also address the broader impact of these practices?
They do, and they touch on something really profound. This idea that as we cultivate inner peace and forgiveness, it naturally ripples outward, influencing our relationships and how we interact with the world. It's like Gandhi's famous quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world."
Wow, that's powerful. So it's not just about feeling better ourselves, it's about creating a more peaceful and compassionate world around us.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to explore in a final part of our deep dive. How do we take these inner transformations and turn them into outward actions? How do we become agents of peace and understanding in a world that desperately needs it?
I'm ready to dive in.
Me too. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
So we've been talking about how to bring mindfulness and forgiveness into our everyday lives, but, it's not always easy, is it?
It's definitely a practice.
And there are going to be those moments where we kind of fall short of those mindfulness ideals.
Absolutely.
We get stressed, we react impulsively, maybe we say something we regret later.
It happens to all of us.
So did the video offer any guidance for how to deal with those inevitable setbacks, those times when we just totally mess up?
They do. And this is where the concept of self-compassion comes in.
Self-compassion. Okay, so not beating ourselves up when we don't get it right.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all human
We're all works in progress,
and we're going to make mistakes.
especially when we're first starting out with mindfulness.
Yeah.
It's not like we suddenly become these perfectly calm and serene beings overnight,
Right. It's a journey.
and there are going to be bumps along the road.
So the video encourages us to be kind to ourselves when we stumble.
To treat ourselves with the same compassion and understanding that we would offer to a good friend.
That's such an important point because we often tend to be much harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else.
Yeah, it's like we have this inner critic that's constantly judging us, evaluating our every move.
And that inner critic can be really harsh.
So how do they suggest we deal with that inner critic?
Well, they encourage us to notice that critical voice without judgment.
So just observe it, acknowledge it, but don't get swept up in it.
Exactly. Just notice it's there and then gently redirect your attention back to the present moment.
Okay, so maybe take a few deep breaths. Recall that inner sanctuary we were talking about earlier. Just kind of shift our focus away from that negative self-talk.
Exactly. It's about creating a more supportive inner environment where we can learn and grow without being paralyzed by fear of failure.
Because if we're constantly beating ourselves up, it's going to be hard to make any progress, right?
Absolutely. Self-compassion is not about lowering our standards or giving ourselves a free pass.
It's about creating a space where we can actually grow and learn from our mistakes.
It's like we're creating a safe space for growth rather than a battleground for self-improvement.
I love that analogy. That really resonates with me. So it's about being kind to ourselves even when we mess up, because that's how we learn and grow.
Exactly. And the more we practice self-compassion, the more resilient we become.
And the more we're able to extend that compassion to others as well.
Absolutely, because as we cultivate inner peace and forgiveness, it naturally ripples outward, influencing our relationships and how we interact with the world.
So it's not just about personal growth. It's about creating a more peaceful and compassionate world around us.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And the video really emphasizes that connection between our inner world and the outer world.
Because ultimately, we're all interconnected, right? What we do and how we think and feel has an impact on those around us.
Exactly. And every interaction, every choice we make is an opportunity to express the peace and forgiveness we've cultivated within.
So it could be as simple as offering a genuine smile to a stranger, practicing patience with a difficult coworker, or choosing to respond with kindness instead of anger when someone wrongs us.
Those small acts of kindness and compassion can make a real difference.
And they can create a ripple effect that extends far beyond ourselves.
Absolutely. It's like planting seeds of peace and understanding that can blossom in unexpected ways.
This deep dive has been so inspiring. It's really opened my eyes to the power of mindfulness and forgiveness and the importance of self-compassion.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
There will be ups and downs, challenges and triumphs. But if we keep practicing, if we keep coming back to these principles,
We can gradually transform ourselves and contribute to a more peaceful and loving world.
that's a beautiful message to end on. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a real pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And remember, even the smallest act of kindness and awareness can make a difference. So go out there and be the change you want to see in the world.
That's a great way to wrap things up. Thanks for listening, everyone. And until next time, may your journey be filled with peace, understanding, and the transformative power of forgiveness.